Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. What's the creepiest thing you've ever seen that made you believe in the supernatural? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My grandparents' house was in a very active location. It was built in the early 1900s. There's an elderly man there who you can visibly see a lot. Sometimes he was at the bottom of the steps going down to the basement. There's a younger woman who is seen in the second story. We think this is his daughter. Doing research on the house, she passed away around 17 years old of tuberculosis. Their last names were Whitaker, if I remember correctly. We've seen stuff move. We saw a picture frame lift up from the wall and fall to the ground a couple of feet out once. When my mom was a kid, she saw the two front chandeliers swinging in exact sync. A lot of the activity tends to happen when there are a lot of people there, so maybe they just don't like all the commotion. Oh, and the night my other grandmother died, I was probably 8 or 9. I apparently told my mom that Mama had been sitting at the end of the bed and told me she loved me, then got up and left. She had died that night. I was home alone once, and I was in my room just doing nothing. While I was in there, I heard pirates clattering downstairs, and I know for a fact that my cat couldn't have done it because the plates are in the cupboards anyway. After this, I texted my parents, who panicked, and my mom eventually came home and called me dumb. I haven't heard the plates doing that again, unfortunately, but man, was it creepy. I saw a shadowy person. I was at my friend's apartment building, which his parents owned. It was a pretty old building in the Pilsen neighborhood of Chicago, and according to his dad, it used to be owned by Al Capone, but I'm not sure how true that was. We had an apartment on the top floor that they let us just hang out at, and it allowed us easy access to the roof so we could go smoke cigarettes. One night we were about to go up, but I had to pee, so I told him I'd meet him up there. After I was done, I went up the stairs to the attic portion that was connected to the roof. There were no lights, so we always used our phones to guide us. We had those old flip phones without lights, so you only had the light from the screen to help navigate the cluttered mess that was up there. As I made my way to the roof door, I saw a shadow pass by me. Now, this wasn't like the shadow of something moving with the light of my phone. The shadow felt solid, like a person. I followed the direction it went, thinking it was my friend. I kept saying that I knew it was him and to stop playing around. It passed me a few more times before heading to the other side of the attic, and that's when I heard my friend's voice from downstairs. He got a call from his girlfriend and was in another room talking to her the whole time. It really freaked me out, since I knew I was following something. So I basically jumped down the stairs. I told my friend what happened and that I did not want to go back up there, and he agreed. So we decided to go for a walk instead. After an uncle died, I was in my mom's room with her and something fell in her closet. We opened the door and something else flew off. My mom just goes, "Hi, insert recently deceased uncle." It was strange because the things that fell were flat on the shelf. There was no way they could have fallen. Another time, I kind of lost my little brother. We went to the store, which was across a busy street. I went to the back to get something, and someone told my little brother I left. He was like 4, so he left. When I got home, he's there, and my mom's pissed. She asks how you got across the street. He said the lady with the red hair. We ask for more details. He basically describes an aunt who had been deceased for quite a while. The real answer we believe him is A, black, red-headed people are kinda rare. My aunt had red hair and was black. B, where was this mystery person, and why didn't they walk him all the way home if it was a real person, as he was 4 years old? I opened the door to my back porch once at like 4 in the morning to what appeared to be an Amazon jungle. We had one of those bug zapper lights, the blue ones. It had been going crazy with buzzes, like it was buzzing constantly. No big deal, not usually. Bugs love that stuff, they're stupid. I had stayed up late because I was doing something super nerdy that I won't get into, and I had looked out my screen window to see this enormous spider, like the size of my hand, the regular size of a tarantula, maybe. I'd never seen one before and got uneasy, so I went to the porch to see what all the fuss was about, and I opened the door to hundreds of bugs, massive bugs, covering the porch, the light, and the walls of the house, all shapes and sizes. I've never seen so many, and bugs kept zapping themselves on the light, giant moths whose flapping wings made them look like flames the size of my fist. The noise was this unforgettable skittering sound, like thousands of those spiders in Minecraft, but nothing was moving except those bugs zapping themselves to death. There was nothing I could do. They didn't seem to know I was there, and I didn't want to know what would happen if they did. I closed the door and went to bed. Going to sleep was easy. I think my brain was overloaded with what I saw. I knew I could deal with it in the morning, tell my mom, whatever. But the next morning there was no evidence that anything was there, and every night after, we never got that festive. No one said anything about it, and I never brought it up to them. And I never saw a giant spider ever again or anything like it ever again. I've heard sometimes that you can transport yourself to a different place and time on Earth, to a world that's both alien and surreal. I wonder if that happened to me at all, or if I just hallucinated the whole thing. I like the supernatural explanation better. Oh man, I have a few stories. The first one that comes to mind is when I was 11 on the computer. I can see a shadow of a female figure slowly rising up on the wall behind the screen. I freaked out because my immediate thought was that my mom was approaching me from behind and was about to catch me watching porn. So I frantically turned around and nobody's there. I immediately turned back to the wall and the shadow was gone. I pulled my pants up and ran outside onto the street. After a few minutes of contemplating what had just happened, I was kind of relieved that a supernatural entity creeped up on me and not my mom. Well, this definitely is an example of priorities, right or wrong. I guess a ghost would be better than your mom in that situation, right? When I lived in Houston, my roommate's 5-year-old daughter got terribly sick, and despite taking care of her into Jefferson Davis Hospital, the doctors couldn't figure it out. In the meantime, this little girl got sicker and sicker until she could hardly lift her head. Then the neighbor across the street brought a witch over and said she knew what to do. This old woman who spoke no English looked the little girl over and then had my roommate bring her a plain juice glass and an egg. The woman prayed over the two items, then broke the egg over the glass and set the egg and glass in the bedroom window. We were told, under no circumstances, not to touch the glass. We all went to bed, and the next morning I woke to my roommate screaming from her daughter's room, and I thought the little girl had died. But to my astonishment, the little girl was sitting up in bed all bright-eyed, telling her mom she was hungry. When we looked in the glass, the egg had turned this really revolting shade of red and black and smelled worse than something dead in the heat. The little girl continued to improve and amaze the doctors. The old witch told the friend across the street that someone put the evil eye on the little girl. Made a believer out of me. I don't know if this belongs here, but I had a friend visit a psychic. During her session, she was told dragonflies would become a symbol of change for her, as well as a list of things that would change in the coming months and years. Things like specific dates, that she would move away, and that she would find new love. Mind you, she was already engaged at this point. A few months later, we were sitting in our tea room when a dragonfly came in through the door and landed on her head. Dragonflies weren't super common where we live, and I had only seen one other time. Both freaked out. Skip to now, and she's no longer engaged to her fiancé and has moved away with her new partner. Not only that, but after all this started happening, we realized that the day she met her new partner was the date that the psychic had mentioned in her session. I'm not a believer as such, but that whole experience made me a little less skeptical. I was at a friend's house out in the middle of nowhere, old big farm and a huge house. We had a really nice evening there, but every time I walked up the stairs to the second floor, where we were going to sleep that night, I felt a weird and creepy feeling. I dismissed it until we decided to go to sleep in her bedroom. My two friends fell asleep in 2 seconds. I didn't sleep a wink that night because for some reason, it felt like someone was watching me. It kept feeling like someone was standing at the edge of the stairs just staring at me, and I didn't dare to either open my eyes or move the whole bloody night. The next morning, as we walked down to breakfast, I casually asked my friend if someone has ever died or if there is anything in the house. She thought about it for a while and then said that, well, the only one she knows about is the previous owner who fell down from the stairs and died. It creeped me out to the effing core. The second thing that happened to me is that when I still lived at the home as a kid, my mom worked nights. My brother was away and my dad slept on the other side of the house, far away from my bedroom. Outside of my room, there's a hall, which no one goes into unless they need to get into either mine or my brother's room. Now, as I think most people can do, I can hear the footsteps of family members walking outside of my door just by listening. One night when I was a teenager, and I said it was only me and my dad in the house on two opposite ends of the house that night. Anyways, I was lying in bed closing my eyes and getting ready to fall asleep when I all of a sudden heard these loud footsteps going from the other end of the hall to standing just outside my room. My door is closed and I just have a feeling that that was the only thing making whatever it was not be able to get in. I sit up in bed, scared absolutely shitless, because I know for a fact that it's not my father, not only by the sounds of the footsteps, but also because it sounds like the person is wearing huge boots or something. The steps keep repeating for a couple of minutes back and forth until it just suddenly disappears. After that, I never ever heard it again. I asked my father if he was, for some reason, running around in the house the morning after, and he just looked at me with a confused face and said, no, of course not. So yeah, who knows? I used to live in a bus with my mom and stepdad. One night on the way to see a movie, we decided to take a shortcut because we were running a little late. As we were heading down the road, we saw an orange blur. Thinking nothing of it, my stepdad kept driving. A bit further up, we saw a male figure in an orange shirt signaling for us to turn around. Given that there had been a storm recently and our bus was effing loud, my stepdad said, a few years later, that he had thought a local living along the road had heard us and came down the road to tell us to turn around because of an uprooted tree or something. So we did. The next day in the local newspaper was an article on a man who had gone around a bend too fast on the road we were on and died. And next to the article was a picture of him wearing an orange shirt. The paper said he died instantly after slamming into a tree, so there wasn't any way he could have been signaling for help. Not me, but my brother told me this the other day. Apparently he was planning on getting an upside down cross tattooed on him, dumb idea already, and to make sure he liked it, he drew a mock-up version in Sharpie where he wanted it on his side, right underneath his armpit. Well, after about a week of having it on, he wakes up at 3 a.m. very suddenly and shoots up in his bed, not feeling groggy or tired in the slightest. He sits there for half a second before running out of his room into the bathroom to wash off the tattoo because he said it felt like it was on fire, and not his whole body, just the tattoo. He said he could clearly feel the outline of the cross burning into his skin, and the pain it was causing him made him start to cry. He said it was like nothing he's ever felt before, and he described it as true fear and agony. Eventually he grabbed some rubbing alcohol and a cloth and got it off, but after that, he said he didn't sleep for the rest of the night and had the lights on the whole time until he had to go to school. He hasn't told this to anyone else besides me because he thought people would think he's crazy, but the whole time he was telling me, he had goosebumps, and we both felt as if there was something else in the room with us. When my uncle died a few years ago, I stayed the night with my cousin, his son, the night he passed. We stayed up talking for hours about different things before finally going to bed around 3 or 4. I remember dreaming that night that my uncle came to us in the house and had rotting flesh all over him. We bandaged him up like we were trying to preserve him. Then he said, "Thanks boys, I love you both, but I've got to go now." Then he walked through the wall and disappeared. I woke up and just felt a chilled feeling. I've never actually seen anything, but this kind of creeped me out and gave me a warm feeling. I still don't believe, but does anyone know what this could have meant? After a series of losses, my aunt and I were sitting at my dining table just reflecting on the tragedies that had befallen our family. I have a dog that is very protective of us in the house and needs to be kept away when people he doesn't know well come over. So my aunt and I are chatting, crying, and lamenting, and we hear hello in a woman's voice coming from behind the door that goes into the basement a mere 4 feet away from us. Our garage is underneath, so it's common for family to enter the house that way. I jump up to go grab the dog before he makes his move, and my aunt goes to the door to crack it open and tell the person to wait while I put him away. But there's no one there. We both heard her. We call down, "Anyone there?" No one responds. We look at each other and go, "What the?" At this point, I get both dogs and release them into the basement because I'm pretty sure someone is in my house and I'm not playing. They ran down and sniffed, but no one, nothing. We still talk about it. I think it was my Nana letting us know she and the many people we recently lost are with her. That's what I choose to believe anyway. Long story short, but about 5 years ago, I was driving my Audi from Lexington, Kentucky to Huntington, West Virginia one night after trade school. I've never driven this route and just happened to have zero cash on me and zero tools in case the car broke along the way. Shortly into the trip, I noticed that the car was misfiring or something. No check engine light, just a loss of power every so often. The only way I could alleviate it was to drive at 60 to 65 miles per hour in 5th gear instead of 6th, and it was fine. I drove this way all the way to Huntington without issue. I was super bummed when I got to the West Virginia line to see that the interstate was curvy and looked fun, but alas, I had to drive slowly because of the misfire. The next day I drove back from Huntington, and the same as the night before. I was fighting the misfire and having to drive slowly for it to not misfire. I stopped in Ashland, Kentucky for a drink, and walking back to the car, I noticed that the front right tire was extremely low. Luckily, the station I was at had an air pump. I aired up the tire and went on my way. Lo and behold, the misfire was now gone. The creepy part is that the car is a 2000 model year and does not have TPMS, traction control, stability control, or any wizardry, only anti-lock brakes. Had this misfire not been making me drive slowly, I probably would have been hammering the curves on I-64 in West Virginia and probably destroyed the tire, wrecked the car, and likely been killed, or worse yet, been injured or caused injury. This car never had another issue with misfire that wasn't an actual misfire, since then after getting the tire fixed until a couple of weeks ago, coming home on the interstate, it started doing the same thing it did 5 years ago. I really didn't think I was going to make it home, but I did. Once again, it turns out the left front tire was low, just under 20 psi. I'm not religious at all, but after that incident 5 years ago is the one that has really caused me to rethink my stance on the powers that be. Now, when my car misfires without a check engine light, I'll just check the tire pressure. When I was 18, many moons ago now, I lived in a house with tons of other people, and it was a revolving door of people on various types and amounts of illegal drugs. I was growing out of my experimental drug phase, but my boyfriend was kind of getting into his. I told him not to mix his drugs, as I had read that drug houses and havens had on occasion become portals for evil, inviting paranormal entities and whatnot. I did not subscribe to it, but what do you do? One evening, I was getting into my jammies in the bedroom. We had put mirrors as a border around the waterbed. I pulled my shirt over my head and looked over at the bed. When I did, I saw the blankets and waterbed moving like something was walking on them. They had little paw prints, but there was no animal on the bed. I would have dismissed it, except that in every square of mirror around the bed, there was a black cat. I did not believe in paranormal activity at all at the time. I can't stress this enough. We had no animals, and I would not allow it due to the volume of effed up people in and out of that house. I came to find out that I was only one of 10 or 11 people that this happened to. I finally had to move out when one day I got home from work and nobody was downstairs but myself. I felt bad or weird, and when I walked past one window that let in light, a dark figure began to chase me across the living room into the bedroom. I don't know what made it stop, but I put a shirt, a pair of jean socks, and a bra in a bag, spirited back across the room, out the door, and drove off never to return. I believe, and I always will always believe. 2 weeks later, A fight happened in that living room. 2 people got killed, and a girl got R'd so severely that she was in a coma. Only 6 people were found in the house, and the 3 survivors required extensive therapy, with one being committed to a state-mandated and run mental hospital. I still don't know what really happened, I believe. This happened a couple years ago. I was backpacking in Northern California, the Shasta Trinity Wilderness area, and had already set up camp for the night. I'm a pretty experienced hiker and have seen or heard some shit in my time out there, bears and the like. Saw that I assumed to be a cult compound once, so I'm not fazed super easily. Back to the story though. I was camped by this lake, drinking some cocoa and putting my fire out before crashing for the night when I heard this blood-curdling scream from across the lake. It was like nothing I'd ever heard before or since, so I was obviously a little on edge. I decided it would be wiser not to fall into horror movie tropes and investigate them, so I very quickly put out my fire and got into my sleeping bag. No tent, we go ultralight or we don't go at all, and tried to ignore the noise and put it out of my mind. Sometime later, maybe 3 a.m., I really couldn't tell at the time, I heard some rustling in the branches nearby, and then another scream from across the river. At this point, I was sufficiently freaked out, so I stuffed my head into my backpack and skedaddled to find a place where I could crash just off the trail nearby. It was the Pacific Coast Trail, so there's loads of little bivouac spots dotted all around it. I spent the rest of the night there, and in the morning I went back to check. Sure enough, the spot where I was looking looked like a windstorm had passed through. Branches were scattered everywhere, and it was hella unsettling. I don't really know what it was, but I just know that it wasn't another person or an animal for certain. Nothing could have made it sound like that.